Commanders predicted to trade. Now, this makes me laugh, kind of. In quotes, best asset, Brian Robinson Jr. 5 potential destinations for the Commanders to trade away their best asset running back.
So there are 5 teams that covet Brian Robinson, according to this.
They're speculating. They're speculating because the running back room is crowded. It doesn't seem like the Commanders are in love with Brian Robinson Jr. They've got guys like Austin Eckler. They re-signed Jeremy McNichols to a 1-year deal. The draft is loaded with running back prospects that you don't necessarily have to pick in the first or even second rounds to get a quality running back.
Yep.
They're just speculating that B-Rob could be on the move.
I mean, I guess
it's a possibility.
I mean, it makes sense if other teams want him. Why don't you go through the teams that they have in there?
All right, some of the teams they have listed as possible destinations. They've got the LA Chargers,
right?
J.K. Dobbins in the backfield. Now they traded for, or they signed Najee Harris in free agency. So that leads me to believe that's probably not going to be the case.
Right.
The New Orleans Saints are a team that could make sense. Alvin Kamara he's either 30 or 29. So he's getting up there. And they haven't had the most reliable running backs behind him depth-wise.
What's funny is they drafted Miller in the 3rd round a couple of years ago. Maybe last year.
Out of TCU.
Yeah, maybe that was last year.
He's been a disappointment to them because
maybe they're looking for somebody else.
That guy's had a hard time staying on the field.
Correct.
I think they also had Jamal Williams, formerly of the Lions and the Packers, as a depth guy there. So that could make sense. The 3rd team on the list is the Baltimore Ravens.
What do you think, Valdez?
Where he could be a backup to Derrick Henry.
Well, kind of like protection,
could
too, of Henry.
Derrick Henry in case he gets injured or needs a blow on the sidelines.
Although Henry's been remarkably healthy throughout his career.
Very durable.
Right?
Yeah, I don't understand that because it's a very crowded room because not only you have Henry, but you have Justice Hill, who's emerged, and Keaton Mitchell, who barely used last year because he was still recovering from his knee injury.
Well, in this one, they just described it as Keaton Mitchell is nothing promising. So they're like writing him off.
What's the return for Washington should they trade Brian Robinson?
It can't be great.
And this actually started from Pro Football Focus. I think the last word on sports is just picking up PFF's.
Okay.
Fifth rounder?
I think 5th rounder might be.
Is that generous?
That might be the ceiling, I would think, for. Now, I'm just guessing. Maybe a 6th or 7th rounder.
I mean, he's an NFL caliber running back.
Right.
He's a proven commodity.
What do you think the odds are that the Commanders and Adam Peters draft a running back?
I'd say it's pretty high. I don't know if it's going to be the first 3 rounds, but I think it's going to be. They're going to pick one at some point during the draft.
I think so, too.
Yeah. There's some really good backs coming out.
Yeah.
Where are they projected to go, though? I mean, I know you have.
I've seen mocks that have.
I mean, probably the top guys like the Genties are going to go 1st round, but I mean, Hampton might go late 1st round, but you could probably. Bashal Tutin, he's a good back for a Tech.
He showed out in the combine.
Had an injury at the end of the last year, but you could probably get him in the 4th round. He's a good player.
I've seen mocks that have Genty going, several mocks that have him going 6 overall to the Raiders. Now, that seems a little high, but I mean, if he's a game breaker like everybody expects him to be and can also catch balls, he's a little undersized.
You know what? If you did a poll, though, what percentage, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, I just don't, but if you put a poll out there, what percentage of Commanders fans would be upset if the Skins moved on from Brian Robinson?
Yeah.
The number's going to be really low.
I think it'd be
probably.
It's going to be in the single digits.
Probably.
Yeah, I was going to say 20% or less, but
it's going to be in the single digits. Because there's just a little bit of a frustration that he just didn't kind of blossom into more.
I remember hearing both of my sons, behind closed doors, like during games, complaining about B-Rob. Like, trust me, in that poll, they would vote. They'd be fine trading him.
But they still do need somebody who's going to take the bulk of the carries.
Understood.
Because obviously Eckler's not going to take the bulk. McNichols is going to take the bulk.
Right.
So they need a guy who's going to take the bulk.
They need a guy who can handle 15 to 17 carries per game.
By the way, early in the season, he was really good. Yeah. You're kind of forgetting, 2nd game of the season, 133 yards on 17 carries. 4th game of the season, he had 101 yards. And then it kind of tailed off.
He had some good games.
The rest of the season, he did have some injuries. Remember, he had the knee injury, which kept him out of, I think it was... don't know if it was the Carolina game, but he missed some games.
Yeah, he did.
And also, I always maintained during the season that I didn't think there were huge holes that Brian Robinson was missing. I didn't see it.
I just don't think there's much that's special about Brian Robinson Jr. I think his skill set is very replaceable.
You don't think that better up front can open up some stuff for him?
It might help a bit.
You know what's surprising about Brian Robinson when you look at it?
His yards per carry.
They've actually increased every year. Like a lot of times you have these guys who have a good rookie season and then they tail off. For some reason, we look down on Brian Robinson, and yet he went from 3.9 as a rookie.
That's pretty mediocre.
Yes, to 4.1 his second season.
What did he do?
4.2? To 4.3 with 8 touchdowns. He missed the Ravens game, so it was just before Carolina. But I just remember early in the season. Don't you remember early in the season? We're like, oh man. I mean, they had one of the best rushing attacks. And we're like, man, Brian Robinson's off to a good year.
I was patting myself on the back because I thought I saw it in the preseason, and they got off to a good start, and then it just kind of faded. And as the team was progressing, he was kind of going backwards, and there was frustration.
Well, yeah, halfway through the season, he had, 7 touchdowns. He finished with 8.
Yeah,
teams probably figured some things out, but I think he'd be a really good number 2. I just don't love him as a number 1, taking the bulk of the carries.
I just think Adam Peters looks at him and says,
I don't like
is he in our long-term future plans? Are we going to re-sign him to a deal when his rookie deal expires? And I would guess his answer is probably no. So he probably wants to get any sort of draft pick compensation he can get for him because he knows he's going to restock his position in this upcoming draft. Is the way I kind of view it.
Yeah, but are you going to restock it? Like if you get a 4th round back, there's no guarantee they're going to be any better than Brian Robinson.
No, of course there's not a guarantee.
No guarantee.
There's no reason to even think that he would be.
Look, Brian Robinson, he was a 3rd round pick.
He was a 3rd round pick.
Like, he's so replaceable.
He's just a guy.
3rd round pick, I know, but if you just draft somebody in the 4th round, there's no reason to think he'll be better. You'd be lucky if he got Brian Robinson's production.
Right, you're all over it. I think you're right. I don't think he's special. I think he's dime a dozen, and I think that's your sentiment too.
I think Adam Peters thinks that too.
However, when you actually look at his production, I think unless you're going to invest a 1st round pick, it's going to be hard to replace his production. And I think we're being a little unfair because I agree with you. Most of the fan base would be like, just throw him to the curb.
Yeah,
he's replaceable. Just toss him out. And I'm like, the guy actually had 3 100-yard games, and they didn't even give him the ball. Like the most he ever had in terms of carries last season was 21, and he went for a $101 in that game. And there was one game when he was kind of stifled against the Saints where they gave him the ball 21 times, but he had 187 carries in all those games. It's not like they give him the rock 25 times.
They probably want someone with a little bit more burst.
I'm sure they
more
do.
athleticism.
I'm sure they do. But when you're drafted in the 4th round or so, which is where we think they probably would take it back,
they
don't have that many picks.
Maybe they surprise us and take one late 1st round.
Maybe they take Marion Hampton late 1st round.
You never know.
You never know. I would be shocked.
How many times does a team take a guy and you go, oh my gosh, can't believe they took him in the 1st round or 2nd round?
I guess.
Did they surprise you last year when they took the defensive tackle from Illinois in the 2nd round?
I think they surprised me on almost every time when they took him. But I just will be shocked if they take a running back that high.
What the fans think they need, they could completely disagree.
Right. Well, if they draft one in the 1st round, sure, then you can expect bigger production. But if you're drafting one in the 4th or 5th round, you'll be lucky.
Well, look, they may not trade him. They may not trade him.
Yeah.
No, this is speculation.
And they still could draft a guy. They could still do that.
I'm kind of in the business of defending him right now. Although I got frustrated too that we didn't get more out of it.
I would defend him if he called us the last couple weeks of the regular season.
Then he'd bail.
Look,
he bailed on us.
I think a running back who can get you 800 or 900 yards in a season and score 6 or 7 touchdowns, I think those guys are all over the place. Those guys are so easy to find. I kind of look at running backs with his skill set like I look at kickers.
Yeah, I think you're disrespecting him a little bit. But that's where I would disagree. I don't think you could just go and just pluck one in the 4th or 5th round or off the street, and he's going to give you 800 or 900 and 8 touchdowns.
Maybe not in the 4th or 5th, but 2nd or 3rd, I would think that.
All right, if you draft one in the 2nd round, I would say you could expect better.
I think if you target a guy in the 2nd round, he's going to have a higher ceiling than anything Brian Robinson's going to deliver to you.
Right. But I think beyond that, you'd be lucky to get what Robinson gave you.
Potentially.
I mean, could he be some freak, like an outlier? Sure. But generally speaking,
yeah, I mean,
you're not going to find a stud in the 5th round, generally speaking.
What about
but Kyron Williams for the Rams is one of the best running backs in the league. He was drafted in the 5th round.
Yeah.
Sure, you have outliers.
Drabby, what about your guy?
But guess what he averaged per carry? Wait a sec. Guess what he averaged per carry?
Who?
Kyron Williams, who you just said is one of the best running backs in the league.
Maybe 4.5?
4.1, exact same as Brian Robinson.
Okay, but Kyron Williams is 100 times better than Brian Robinson.
He's better, and he has a bigger role. Look at his number of carries.
Yes, he has a bigger role. That's part of our point, is that Brian Robinson in this system with Jaden Daniels, who actually had more rushing yards than Brian Robinson, you're not going to get as many carries. If he was in LA with Matt Stafford, who doesn't move around like Jaden Daniels, he probably would have a similar total to Kyron Williams.
No, he's not as good.
Kyron Williams had 26 touchdowns the last 2 years.
If Brian Robinson were as good as Kyron Williams, he would be getting the ball 20 plus times per game.
Not with Jaden Daniels. Are you gonna take away Jaden Daniels running?
I want Jaden Daniels to run
just
too,
because they both average 4.1 per carry doesn't mean they're equal players.
They're in different systems.
Kyron Williams is a better player than Brian Robinson.
100%.
He's just a better back.
Look, if Brian Robinson were so good, he would get more carries per game. He's just not as good. His skill set is not the same.
I don't think you're going to find any running back in this system, so long as Jaden Daniels runs about 10 times a game, who's going to get the amount of carries as Kyron Williams.
If that's the case, then maybe keeping Brian Robinson as a status quo is the right move. But he's not as good as Kyron Williams. I'm sorry.
Are you claiming they should keep Brian Robinson because he's one of the best backs in the league, like Kyron Williams is?
What I'm saying is, I think we are undervaluing Brian Robinson, and that it's. I think you're
the only one in the room that's.
I agree with DB. It's going to be tough to replace him unless you go with the first round pick with somebody that's going to be better than him.
I think Brian.
And then
Robinson's
I think actually he's better than you remember. Especially the first half of the season, he was scoring a bunch of touchdowns.
I don't think it's special, but 800 yards or whatever he had and 8 touchdowns. Pretty good production for a guy who's basically an afterthought.
Yeah, but you can get, like Cakes is saying, you can get that from a lot of different guys.
Okay. I mean,
look,
maybe 10 guys.
Adam Peters didn't draft him. He knows he's not special. He knows he can find a better replacement in the draft that's going to be ultimately
depends on what round.
Cheaper than Brian Robinson. And he can get a draft pick.
And I'm sorry.
Maybe in return.
You can grill me, but Kyron Williams had 14 touchdowns, which is great, on 316 carries for 1,300 yards. Yeah, Brian Robinson only had 187 carries, gave you 8 touchdowns. And actually, I was incorrect. Averaged 4.3 a pop versus Kyron's 4.1 a pop.
All right, what did Kyron Williams do last year? 2 years ago. Sorry, 2 years ago.
2 years ago, Kyron Williams, didn't he score a zillion touchdowns?
Yeah, how about 12?
Yeah, you're going to die on the B-Rob hill.
He's got 26 touchdowns in 2 years.
On that hill.
It's not dying on a hill. It's a different system. Don't you recognize?
They're giving him the ball because he's better.
If he were special, he would. Here's my point. If Brian Robinson were so special, he would get the role that Kyron Williams has.
Nobody's arguing he's special.
You would cut a little bit into,
so wait a second.
Nobody's arguing
Jaden Daniels rushing.
Nobody's arguing that Brian Robinson is special.
I think JP's kind of arguing that.
I'm not. What I'm arguing is you're undervaluing what he is. And somehow you've propped up Kyron Williams to be Saquon Barkley.
I guarantee you there were times last year where you said, Brian Robinson, they got to upgrade from Brian Robinson. I guarantee
I don't disagree with that.
I guarantee you said that multiple times.
And I've said that the whole time here.
No, you're telling me Brian Robinson's as good, if not better, than Kyron Williams because he averaged 0.2 yards per carry more. I mean, that's absurd.
Well, context matters. He's in a different system.
They give him the ball because he's better and he's more productive. Also, if he wasn't productive, they wouldn't give him the ball as much.
If Brian Robinson Jr. were traded to the Rams today and Kyron Williams is there, you know who's going to get the ball more? Kyron Williams. 1,000%.
Yeah,
I bet you Brian Robinson and Sean McVay's system would do a lot better than what he's done here in Washington because he'd get the ball more. And he'd have Matthew Stafford under center, not somebody that's running read options, taking the ball for himself.
All right, we'll take your calls.
And by the way, Kyron Williams last year, or I'm sorry, 2 years ago, averaged 5.0 per carry.
Right. 800-636-1067. Do you stick with Brian Robinson? Do you try to trade him for a 5th or 6th round draft pick because you know you're not going to re-sign him when his rookie deal is up? We'll take your calls on that next. And don't forget, Jerry Palm will break down the brackets with us coming up at 8 o'clock.